Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Unpaid Interns. Austin Render here with you. It's Friday, September 4th. I have a great show lined up for you today. We'll talk a little bit here at the top about some of the theatrics that went on in the NBA and the NHL last night. And then we'll get to Kevin Bowen of 1070 The Fan, Colts and Pacers insider, and we'll talk all things Nate McMillan's firing, the Colts season coming up. It's hard to believe the NFL is 6 days away from kicking off with Texans and Chiefs next Thursday night. I think all of us could use a little bit of football in our lives, so we're excited about that one. Let's hit a couple of the notes from last night. OG Anunoby, what a huge shot. He keeps the Raptors from going in a 3-0 hole, down 2 with half a second left. Kyle Lowry threw a beautiful pass all the way across the court with Taco Fall guarding the inbounder. Kyle Lowry threw it over Taco Fall all the way to OG in the other corner. He hits the three. And, of course, in typical OG fashion, very stoic. And after the game, he says, "I don't shoot to miss." And it's fair. So he knew it was going in, and it went in. And now the Raptors are back in that series 2-1 in advantage of Boston. The other series, Clippers routed the Nuggets. You have to wonder if Denver running on fumes right now after a really competitive 7-game series with the Jazz. I have to wonder if they have what's left in the tank to try and take down the Clippers. 2-game sevens will happen tonight in the NHL playoffs. It'll be the Avalanche and the Stars at 4 o'clock. Then the nightcapper tonight, the Canucks and the Golden Knights. And for the first time ever, 2 announcers will be doing 2-game sevens in one day. Kenny Albert and Pierre McGuire will be on the call for both of those games. So congratulations to those two. Looking forward to some Game 7 action tonight. Then tomorrow, the Flyers and the Islanders will cap off the second round of the NHL playoffs when they have to battle it out in another Game 7 tomorrow night. It was a double overtime goal from the Flyers last night that forced Game 7. So a lot of great drama happening across both playoff leagues right now. Back in the soap opera that is college sports and mainly college football right now, the Pac-12 yesterday announced an agreement with a company that will get them daily testing for all athletes. And it's starting to make a November restart for all sports very likely, which could include football, could include the rest of the fall sports, and certainly the winter sports as well. College basketball is still aiming at a Thanksgiving time start to their season across the country, and they will allow leagues to start whenever they want. But the big thing there is football. The 2 commissioners have been very open, saying that they want to start at the same time, or at least this was Pac-12's mindset. They really want to make sure it's concurrent with at least the Big Ten so that they can keep the Rose Bowl alive and still have somebody to play in the postseason. If they go their separate ways, they would just be playing on their own. Another news topic from college football, Dabo Swinney was asked about whether or not he thinks that the conferences starting later should still have a chance at a delayed college football playoff, maybe pushing it back to February or so. And Dabo was not a fan of that. Just the big headline on ESPN, Dabo against the delay. He wants to make sure that if you're starting on time, this was his quote, "We're ready to roll." That would be something I wouldn't be in favor of. It'd be hard to start in November and then push the season into February. So it'll be interesting. Larry Scott, the Pac-12 commissioner, is all for the Rose Bowl appearance, trying to keep that alive and giving the Pac-12 and the Big Ten something to talk about. So interesting dynamics. In the Big Ten, you got President Trump trying to push the league forward. He says they're on the 1-yard line. I don't think that's the case, but he's pushing the Big Ten forward. And then in the Pac-12, you've got a huge daily testing company that is trying to push them forward. And you just have to wonder, there's still so much to be determined, but it's almost like who's going to look the best? Is it going to be the teams and the conferences trying to play right now, the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, some of these smaller conferences that have already started? Or is it going to be the Big 10 and the Pac-12 who are waiting to start? We'll get to that at another show. Obviously, still too much to be determined there. Let's bring in our guest. He was so good the first time. We're bringing him back. Kevin Bowen of 1070 The Fan. Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Austin. Sorry. You would think by now I'd learn to unmute myself.
All good. Happy to have you. Glad you could join us again. We'll talk a lot of Indianapolis sports here, but I think the last time you were on, you were about to embark on the journey of fatherhood. How's that going for you?
It is a learning experience every day, but it's absolutely awesome. Not to get too cheesy, but I've felt some feels that I didn't know that I had in me. So Rosie Bowe, our daughter, is about 10 and a half weeks old, I guess. So I can hear her kind of murmuring upstairs as we speak. But yeah, she's doing awesome. She's healthy. Mom's healthy. And those are the most important things.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. I just wanted to throw that in there before we got too deep into the sports world. There's things that are more important than sports, and that's certainly one of them. Let's talk about the bubble. The Pacers played relatively well in the seeding games, get the 4 seed, but then a clean sweep, and it did not go the way anyone thought it would with the Pacers. Do you think it was, and it could be a mixture, but do you think it was more of the Pacers playing so poorly, or the Heat? Now that we've seen the Heat and what they've done against the Bucks, was it the Heat just being really good?
I think when you look at the margin of those 4 games, I point to the latter. I didn't expect the Pacers to win that series by any means, but I expected it to be more competitive. And I certainly expected the Pacers to probably win at least a game. They went 6-2, like you said, in the bubble restart, including beating a full strength Philadelphia team with Ben Simmons, a Lakers team that played LeBron and Anthony Davis late into that game, Houston as well. No Russell Westbrook, but still, they were able to win all 3 of those games. So the stat that I keep on coming back to that I just can't get out of my head is the 4 fourth quarters of those games. The Pacers led for 11 seconds of those entire fourth quarters. I mean, that's just not competitive. I know on the scoreboard there might have been a 6-point margin or whatever, but still, I never got the feeling watching those games that they were even that close. I think Kevin Pritchard, their team president, has admitted that now here with their actions and his words over the past couple weeks. So Miami is, probably the darling of the bubble right now. It's really impressive what Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley have built and how that team is playing. But still, I thought Indiana was pretty disappointing when they got in the postseason.
Well, I think it was, in my opinion, it was talked about a lot, but I think it might have been fair, the loss of Domantas Sabonis and the impact that had. Where did you see that impact the team the most with his absence?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a huge loss. I don't want to undermine that. I said before the series started, I think Sabonis is the most important Pacer player. Yeah, I think he's more important than Victor Oladipo, Malcolm Brogdon, even this just incredible run TJ Warren had. But I'd say 2 things stand out to me, Austin. Rebounding. This is a team that is extremely poor on the glass, and Sabonis is by far their most consistent rebounder. He falls out of bed and gives you 18 and 12. And they just don't have anybody like that. And I know Miami's not a big team, but they beat up the Pacers on the glass. And then secondly, I would just say a guy you can throw the ball to in the half court and you don't need to script something crazy, design some wild play. Sabonis just can go get you a bucket, or he can go find a bucket with his passing, his facilitating, his screening. He averages 5 assists per game this season. And it's a shame they don't give assists for screens. I mean, he frees up guys. He's one of the better screeners that the Pacers have. I'll never forget, I think some of your listeners know, Greg McDermott, the head coach of Creighton, is the father of Doug McDermott, for the Pacers. And he was on our airwaves earlier this year saying, I don't know where Doug's going to go future-wise in the NBA, but I just want him to stick with Domantas Sabonis and TJ McConnell. Like, those are the guys that get them open. They obviously McConnell doing the passing, but Sabonis' screening ability is so underrated. So I think in the half court, when things got stagnant, when the Pacers struggled to get to the foul line, you weren't getting a whole lot out of the post. Just throwing the ball into Sabonis, either he scores with the left hook or he's able to make a play out of that. I think those are the 2 areas that really hurt this team.
I think we knew this was going to be a busy or an intriguing offseason just right when it ended because you've got everything with Victor Oladipo and some of these other guys that can they keep them together? Can they pay everybody? And then you get the firing of Nate McMillan, and that kind of spiced up the offseason even more. Let's focus on that for a second. Do you think it was fair the way the Pacers went about it? And do you think it was the right decision?
I think it was the right decision. How they went about it, I probably don't agree with. Sounds like Herb Simon, the owner, didn't even talk to Nate McMillan. I mean, that's a big no-no to me with everything Nate's given this franchise over the last 4 years. Obviously, the whole extension 2 weeks prior to the firing is just weird and odd. And if there really was kind of an agreement between the two sides, which it seems like there was, of if we can't get out of the first round, it's time to go. And it sounds like that. I mean, that's what Nate thought as well. This is not just a Kevin Pritchard, Herb Simon thing. If that's a scenario, why announce the extension? Why even do that? Obviously, financially, it seems ludicrous to do that. Just throw away that money. But also, just from an optics standpoint and what it looks like to Nate, I don't think that's great either. But I do think it's the right decision. I think we talked about it maybe a couple of months ago when I hopped on with you guys. The elephant in the room for Nate McMillan coach teams is what can they do in the playoffs? And this is across three franchises. This is not just a Pacers thing. Seattle, Portland, the same way. He's coached for 16 years, and his teams have won one playoff series. After a while, it's just a different chapter, but the same story. It's pretty much this is what happens. Teams for him typically overachieve or at least play well in the regular season, but they just run out of gas. And, I thought back to my IU days and even, now I feel like, people think this a bit about Archie Miller coach teams, but certainly some of the Tom Crean coach teams of, you're peaking so much in the non-conference that when the grind of the Big Ten gets here and you get scouted like none other, and those coaching staffs know you up and down and they know, Johnny, whatever his name is, who used to be a walk-on, and Daniel. I mean, they know everybody on that roster. You've got to be able to counter. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be willing to do some different things. And I don't think Nate's a bit stubborn in his ways on both ends of the floor. And I don't think the Pacers had an advantage on the sidelines. And in this market, if you don't have that, you're not going to do much in the postseason. I don't look at Miami as this overly talented team compared to the Pacers. But now look at where the Heat are, in this playoff run. So I do think it was time. And I really stress this. When you're in this market, you're not going to be able to attract the big name free agents. That's reality of the NBA in 2020. So if that's the case, you better do two things really well as a franchise. Hit on draft picks and have a head coach that, from an X's and O standpoint, can outcoach on a routine night. And I don't think Nate is that come playoff time when, again, you're scouted like none other. And then obviously, I don't think this is just a Nate situation. I think looking at drafts moving forward, this is a franchise that's got to start to hit on first round picks like they did, back in the 2010 days with Paul George and Danny Granger and even a Roy Hibbert, things like that.
It does feel like that's been a bit of a swing and a miss lately with Goga and TJ Leaf, a couple of guys that just really aren't producing. Where do the Pacers go next? What are they eyeing in terms of a coach? What has Kevin Pritchard kind of let on there?
Yeah, he's been very candid with it and saying new era, modern approach, modern offense. So the Pacers were dead last in the NBA in three-point shooting last year, three-point attempts and free throw attempts. Those things have to change. This can't be just 2-point ball and you're hitting a bunch of 14-footers like it's Hoosiers. This has got to be a little bit more of a you get to the rim or you just, shoot more threes. I'm not saying you need to be the Rockets, but there's got to be more of a willingness to do that. Kevin also really drilled home, I need better communication from my head coach with today's player. The NBA is not what the NBA used to be. Even five years ago, load management wasn't even a phrase. And now it's what you hear on a night in, night out basis. So I think Nate, while he's young, for a head coach, relatively in his 50s, I think he's a little bit stuck in like when I played in the mid 90s, None of that was around. And you've got to be, again, willing to adapt, willing to listen. So I think to myself, offensive minded head coach. And then I also think, would an assistant make some sense? Because, assistants to me usually have a little bit more of a personable relationship with players than maybe the head coach does. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. You don't need to hit a home run in terms of a name. You don't need to win the press conference. You aren't trying to attract, a bunch of recruits or a bunch of boosters, to your program. I mean, Mike Budenholzer, Nick Nurse, Frank Vogel, you think those guys won the press conferences when they were first hired? No. You just need people that are going to flat out outcoach. Spoelstra's the same way. People that are just going to flat out outcoach and be relatable to your players.
Yeah, Woj started throwing out D'Antoni right when it happened. And I don't know about you, but that seems like a press conference type of hire there. What do you think if they were to go after D'Antoni?
Couldn't agree more. I don't need my next door neighbor to read the Indy Star and be like, oh, yeah, I know that guy. That's a great hire. No, that doesn't matter to me. What, again, matters to me is Mike D'Antoni's going to take one look at this roster and say, wait, what? How am I going to play the style that I want to play with this roster? And I think there needs to be tweaks to the personnel. Like, I'm not sitting here acting like this is you're a coach away from being an Eastern Conference Finals team or something like that. There is, a couple of things that need to happen. But he's 69 years old. Again, such a different looking roster than what you have in Houston. It sounds intriguing. It's curious. Maybe the Phoenix teams are a little bit, that team maybe is a little bit more comparable to these Pacers teams in terms of personnel and style, but still, that one to me. And honestly, to be fair, Austin, I don't look at, and I think any NBA coach hire, you're always going to be like, like even the Steve Nash hire yesterday, I'm like, wow, that's wild. I didn't even think about that. But then I'm like, wait, has Steve Nash ever coached?
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like he's more of a soccer guy nowadays. So it's just kind of one of those things where I think no matter what the Pacers do, there's going to be skeptics.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever please an entire fan base by any means. You mentioned some of those things that have to be done personnel wise. Oladipo's a big name that people are talking about. Will he stay in Indiana? Does he want to go? Because from what I've read, it doesn't sound like Indiana can pay him as much as someone else could. What does Indiana have to do to keep him around?
So the extension the Pacers can give him this offseason actually would be more than anybody else. Now, if he waits till free agency next summer, that's where it gets a little bit dicey in terms of the financials. I think two things stand out to me with Victor Oladipo. If you're Kevin Pritchard, you have to ask internally within your building, can he be the alpha on a championship team? That's your first question you have to ask. The second question, and probably if the first question's yes, and you still think that, then you get to the second question, and that is, does Victor want to be here long term? If either of those answers have a hesitancy or a no to it, you trade him flat out. And I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear. And trust me, I love covering Victor Oladipo at IU. Just loved how he carried himself, the story, what he meant for that resurgence really of a program there kind of in the middle part of the Tom Crean era. But I think the stardom, I think the brand, I think the handlers have controlled a lot of this. And he's never been a free agent in the NBA either. That's pretty rare for a number 2 overall pick to be this late into your career and have never experienced free agency. Orlando picked him. Then, Oklahoma City was the trade, and then the Pacers and all that. So, again, if either of those are no, you have to trade him. And I want a Hollywood story, but I won't return on one of my best players. Is it going to be great return? No. But that's the move you've got to make. Because if he were to walk in free agency next summer, or if you gave him that north of $100 million deal, and he's just kind of a fringe all-star moving forward, that kills you financially. So those would be my concerns with it. I thought he had a couple more moments of pretty good basketball in the bubble, but still not enough for me to confidently say yes on either of those two.
I just have this feeling, and I'm with you. I love Victor Oladipo, but it feels like kind of a I don't know if this playing style is the exact same, but like a Kyle Lowry, where like Lowry needs a Kawhi or a DeMar DeRozan or a Siakam, and he can be their number two. It feels like that's where Oladipo is post injury. I don't know if you think the same way, but like I'm nervous he can't get back to where he was.
No, I could not agree more with you there. The thing about Victor, which I always loved how he played the game because he's so reckless. He's
Hmm.
a 6'4" guard that doesn't shoot it great, but yet when he's healthy and he's attacking the rim, it is fearless. It's finishing through contact. It's dunking on dudes.
Hmm.
That rim and I are going to meet, and I don't care who's in between it. And you love that about him. Unfortunately, the knee injury was just huge. It was unprecedented. Nobody in the NBA that plays the game like Victor has gone through that sort of injury. Look at him in the bubble. I mean, you talk about a guy that relied on a lot more of those jump shots. And I just think he's too streaky of a shooter. I know he's worked a lot on that form, but I don't think he can ever be a consistent 40% guy from behind the arc. And he chucked up a lot in the bubble. It seems like when he got in the lane and he drove, he really struggled to handle the ball. And a lot of people, I think here locally are like, well, Paul George came back. I think it's two totally different things. Paul George broke his leg. A lot easier to come back from bone than it is to come back from a tendon. And think about the two ways those guys play the game. Again, Victor is a 6'4" shooting guard that doesn't shoot it great. Paul George is a 6'8" wing that shoots it incredibly. Like he can, hang out around the perimeter and still be a pretty good player. If Victor had maybe like a Carmelo skill set, face up, I'll just shoot over you, you would feel a little bit better about it. But when he's at his best, it's downhill, being the freak athlete that he is. And if this injury hinders him in any way, it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of it. Then I just can't see him getting back to that all NBA level, which to me, he's got to get there to deserve the contract that he probably wants.
Is there anything else the Pacers need to tackle this offseason in terms of maybe a Miles Turner Sabonis type of relationship or even a small thing like TJ McConnell? Like, where do the Pacers look this offseason to try and get better?
Free agent wise, no one is up besides Justin Holiday, who I do think is a key piece off the bench. Be nice to bring him back. The Pacers don't have a lot of cap space, which makes sense considering they don't have a lot of free agents. But I would go back to the first point you made, the two bigs, Sabonis and Turner. At times this year, really good success. At other times, a bit of a head scratching unit. And I thought Kevin Pritchard was pretty candid in saying whoever the next coach is, he or she will decide. I mean, that's kind of what he said of they will make the decision on this pairing. And when I hear modern coach, modern era, I don't hear two bigs in the starting lineup. So if that's the case, you got to trade one of them. I would trade Turner. I think as a rim protector, he gives you something, but not as much as what Sabonis gives you. And the rebounding would be my biggest worry because if you're going to trade one of them, you're inevitably going to be a little bit smaller in the starting lineup. So I would want the more consistent rebounder at the 5 position, and that would be Domas. I think you could actually get some decent value back for Miles because I think there are a lot of teams in the league that would love just, 36% from the 3 from the 5 position and a guy that can defend the rim as well. So I would make that move. I just can't see a coach coming in and saying, oh, 2 bigs and your rebounding numbers look like that. I just can't see them wanting to run that back. So ideally, you probably get a draft pick in one of these trades if you do make multiple ones, because like you said earlier, TJ Leaf, Goga, I mean, even Aaron Holiday, he's not a starter. I think he'd be a nice bench guy, but still, I mean, those are 3 first-round picks that you have a lot of concerns on. Can they be a starter in the NBA, let alone be a star? It's difficult to hit on draft picks. I'm not acting like it's easy, but you got to take chances.
Kevin Bowen joining us here from 1070 The Fan. Really good insight there on the Pacers. Let's move to the Colts because oddly enough, we're about a week away. And I think I said this in the open. I think we could all use some football right now. I think it would be healing, at least for myself. I would enjoy it a lot. What have been your takeaways so far from watching this team in training camp, and what do they look like to you? What could they be?
Yeah, I mean, not to pour salt in the wounds, but tonight was supposed to be Wisconsin IU.
No, don't do it, Kevin. We all know this.
If I'm not mistaken. Now, granted, with my history and watching IU play Wisconsin, maybe it's a good thing that
I was supposed to be there.
that the game was canceled. Yeah, that is a huge bummer. What have I seen so far in general? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just kind of your takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, I'm beyond thrilled that we're 6 days away from the NFL starting. And I wake up, last night when my daughter's fussing, I scroll through my Twitter timeline and I see South Alabama Southern Miss tweets up and down. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Welcome to 2020. Just put the Notre Dame flag out front. I'm a big Notre Dame fan. So, yeah, I'm thrilled about that. Colts-wise, I think the expectations are to win the AFC South. The over-under in Vegas is right around 9 wins. I see about 10 for them. Phillip Rivers, to me, while there are questions about him physically as a quarterback at this point of his career, I just think mentally he brings a whole lot to the table that was missing last year with Jacoby Brissett as the starter. The Colts really drove home that, the processing aspect of playing quarterback wasn't up to par last year for them. Identify, okay, that's the coverage, that's the blitz, this is where I'm going to go, and if that's not open, I'm going to go here. That was, I think, not as quick as they would like it. I think Rivers gives you that. Ball's going to come out fast, decisive, maybe some no-huddle stuff as well. So that's probably been the big takeaway from the quarterback.
We've had Matt Taylor and Zach Kiefer on last week, really breaking down the position area. So I want to break down the schedule with you right now. Where does the schedule kind of set up in favor of the Colts, and where could it hit them hard?
Yeah, I mean, in favor, you got to look right out of the gate. I mean, you're playing the JV team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, to start. I say that, and the Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014. They're 7.5-point favorites right now in week 1. For those that follow those lines, that is an absurdly high road number for the Colts. I think it's the second highest in 7 or 8 years. And it just, kind of has a little trap game feel to it. 90-degree heat, week 1, all that stuff. But you got to get the games early. Off the top of my head, I think it's like Minnesota, Jets, Bears, Browns, Bengals, something like that early on. I mean, there's an opportunity to go 5-2. Who knows? Maybe a game better than that before they have a gauntlet there in November. It's like Baltimore, Tennessee, Green Bay, Houston, I think is thrown in there as well. So that's the difficult stretch for this football team. But, considering you've got the divisional game right out of the gate, it's paramount. This team has not dominated the division like they used to do. So I would say early in the season is where you got to get it.
It does feel like the AFC South is down. I thought last year was a good year for the AFC South. At the beginning, Colts were competitive. Titans had this resurgence. The Texans had Deshaun Watson, so they'll always get the attention. But you trade away DeAndre Hopkins. You think the Titans are going to take a step down. So you firmly believe the Colts are probably the favorite?
Yeah, but I also think it's very close. I feel like I've always kind of carried a flag for the AFC South. I think it's kind of gotten a bad rap,
Totally agree.
Last year, Tennessee and Houston won road playoff games. It's not something that I think a lot of people would have expected. You look at what Tennessee did in Arrowhead, 3 or 4 years ago with Mariota winning a playoff game. And, the Colts obviously, have made the playoffs here recently. So I look at this division right now. I think Indianapolis is a slight favorite. I think Tennessee's going to be right there. Can Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill do that again? Probably not. But I do think Mike Vrabel's a really good coach. And the thing about Tennessee, in this market, we have such a skewed opinion of them because the Colts dominate the Titans. Mm-hmm. They've won 14 of 17, 14 of 8, something absurd. Well, every year Tennessee just seems to show up week 17 and they're like 8-7, 9-7. They're like right in the mix. So they've had 4 straight winning seasons. I don't think, a lot of people would think that about the Titans. So they'll be there. And then while Watson has lost Hopkins, which is such a huge loss, if you just looked at Houston, if you showed up from Mars and you didn't know the NFL, but you knew some names. I don't know if that analogy makes sense. But anyways, if you look at their wideout group, it's not terrible. I mean, Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Kiki Kuti, Kenny Stills, health is a concern, but like that's a pretty good 4-man group if healthy. So if they can protect Watson, which is always the biggest if, they got the best quarterback in the division. So I don't want to write them off just yet. So honestly, if you were going to make me like predict wins for the AFC South teams, like Indy at 10, Tennessee at 9, Houston at 8, Jacksonville at 3. Maybe
They
not even
traded
3.
away everybody, so they're
Yeah.
fully tanking for
Yeah.
Lawrence.
Clever for Trevor, whatever the phrase is. So yeah, I mean that's kind of how I look at the division right now.
I was watching, I think it was during that fantasy marathon that ESPN does, and I was just watching something on ESPN, and on the side they're ranking the fantasy defenses, and the Colts came up number 6. And I really can't tell you the last time that the Colts had a defense that highly ranked in anything in my lifetime. So I mean, what's the realistic ceiling for this Colts unit on the defensive side?
Yeah, I think part of that is if the analytics people really think the schedule's very easy. I think it's one of the easier schedules in the league. So I think that influences some of that. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people pretty high on this Colts defense. I'm probably more of like hovering around, 10 to 12 for this defense this season, which again, as you just said, in this lifetime, that's incredible for the Colts. They've really struggled to force turnovers. They haven't been top 20 in forced turnovers in like a decade. So that's got to change. You go out and you trade the 13th overall pick for DeForest Buckner. That means that guy needs to be an all-pro. And there's a lot of signs pointing to him being that. But still, without Nick Bosa, without Eric Armstead, can he still have the same sort of production disruption when probably more attention now is on him? But yeah, I mean, the Colts bring back a lot of pieces. Corner is probably a group that I'm a little bit worried about. A little thin there. They had Marvell Tell, a guy opt out, who I thought would have provided some nice depth. So yeah, I mean, I think on paper there are reasons to like the Colts defensively. Their pass defense really has been atrocious. The run defense has been pretty good. Pass defense has struggled though. And I think if you can get the pressure, Buckner, Kemoko Tury's a young guy they like off the edge. If he can get healthy, show that speed trade as well, then I think that'll help out the back end.
I think that's the huge thing is, can he get pressure, because that'll help the young corners hopefully to play a little better. Who's somebody, I think we're all talking about Buckner, we're all talking about Phillip Rivers and some of the draft picks, but who's somebody that is going to be extremely vital to this Colts campaign that maybe just isn't really getting any attention right now?
Well, I just mentioned Turay. He's a former second-round pick that has flashed. He's got an unbelievable burst and ability to bend off the edge, which is what you want for a speed rusher. But again, health has been the concern. If people remember, the Colts beat the Chiefs last year on Sunday Night Football. Final defensive snap of that game, Kemoko Turay sacks Patrick Mahomes. He also dislocates and fractures his ankle on the play, and we haven't seen him since. So he's supposed to be practicing somewhat soon. If he can give you that off the edge, now it's okay. Do you commit 2 to Buckner and then only 1 to Turay? Like that. That's sort of, you still have Justin Houston, obviously. Those are the predicaments that you get into as an opposing offense that can make the Colts front pretty good. I would say offensively for the Colts, 2 names stand out to me. One is Trey Burton, tight end coming over from the Bears. Unfortunately, he got hurt last Saturday at Lucas Oil in their practice, and I worry about his readiness. It sounds like he's going to miss a game or 2 to start the year. And then Paris Campbell at wideout. Again, former second-round pick, fastest 40-yard dash at the combine. I swear I'm not rubbing this into IU football, but I won't forget maybe 2 years ago, IU, or 3 years ago, IU Ohio State, Thursday nighter, I want to say.
Yep. That was my freshman year.
Okay. Yeah, I was at that game. My sister-in-law just graduated from IU, so we were down visiting her. And I mean, watching Paris Campbell, he just was in a different gear than any player on the field all night. And honestly, any Ohio State player all night. I mean, he just had that dude can rev it up to a mile per hour that not a lot of guys can. Unfortunately, tons of injuries for him last year, only played 7 games. In this offense, Rivers getting the ball out quick, yards after catch is huge. If Campbell can stay healthy, I think there'll be some big plays schemed up for him.
Poor guy. I mean, he just gets in a car crash and has to go into concussion protocol. I mean, that guy can't catch a break, but I think I saw he's back, cleared to play. So hopefully he'll be ready to go for week 1. That was good Pacers, good Colts talk. Before I let you go, you live smack dab in the middle of Big Ten country. So I got to get your thoughts on what's going on. I mean, what have kind of been your thoughts on the way the Big Ten has handled, whether that's been well or poorly, this college football season?
Yeah, I'm really disappointed in the presidents across the conference. No transparency from them. Um, we deserve to hear from them. We deserve to hear more reasoning. Honestly, if there are these massive medical concerns or whatever is leading to, the Big Ten deciding not to play, let us know. We need more information about all of this. So that's been extremely disappointing to see. Trump's involvement, I'm sure, is very political considering how many swing states are in the Midwest. Him and Kevin Warren talking earlier in the week, but it just flat out sucks. I mean, I love college football more than anything. Like I said, I just put out my Notre Dame flag. It's weird to think there'll be a game in South Bend, Indiana a week from Saturday, and there won't be a game in West Lafayette or Bloomington. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me when you think about it like that. So, obviously, I realize there's some long-term questions about COVID and whatnot, and those need to be addressed. But still, from a handling standpoint, just really, really disappointed that we haven't heard more from presidents who are, have made this decision that is impacting student athletes, impacting students, impacting communities all across, the Midwest and I guess a little bit of the East Coast as well. So I think we deserve that at the bare minimum.
I promise this is my last before I let you go question because I just thought of it. Indianapolis obviously supposed to be a big host for a lot of events here coming up. What do you know about those events? Has there been any comments on some of like the NBA? I don't even remember all the events, but I think the Final Four was coming. The All-Star game. What do you know about that?
Yeah, I mean, sounds like the All-Star game will be a no-go. That was supposed to be in February. Obviously, who knows when the NBA season will even start, let alone an All-Star game with fans. Final Four is supposed to be here in April. We'll see how that plays out. And then I think it's next January, so January 2022, I believe that is the college football championship game. Goes without saying what that event would mean to the city as well. You have Big Ten championships. I was at the Michigan Rutgers game, on noon of Thursday Big Ten tournament, the night after IU played Nebraska and when all, what broke. So that's the final event, that we've seen in our city. And I'll be biased. Our city does it better than anybody else. I've been fortunate to go to a lot of big sporting events across the U.S. and no one does it better than Indy. And it was an unbelievable run of events of Big Ten basketball. The Sweet 16 Elite Eight was supposed to be here this past year. Obviously, the Big Ten title game for football every December. Like I said, college football championship. Even the Indy 500, of course. So just from an economic value standpoint, it's just absolutely demoralizing and hurts so many industries here in our downtown and surrounding communities. So hopefully we can inch back a little bit. But yeah, that'll be something to monitor a lot here in the spring. And what happens to college basketball? I feel like it's been floated around of bubbles, maybe in Indianapolis. It would make sense. Is that something that we see? So yeah, for someone that works downtown, I absolutely bummer, but that's where we're at right now.
Well, Kevin, I really appreciate you coming on a second dose here. We appreciate all your insight. Best of luck to you and health to the family.
Thank you, Austin. Enjoy the school year, man.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Take care. That was Kevin Bowen of 1070 The Fan, joining us to talk Colts, Pacers, and some Indianapolis tidbits as well. I agree with his sentiments. Indianapolis is a great host city, and it just won't be the same to see some of those events that Indianapolis would have had a killer time hosting, just not get to be. So maybe the NBA will find a way to get Indianapolis involved down the road, but unfortunate to see that likely go away in February. That'll wrap things up here from today's episode. A huge thank you to Kevin Bowen for coming on with us. A huge thank you to our guests this week. Popular show on Wednesday with Alexi Lalas. A reminder, you can always watch or listen to our past episodes on the IU Sports Media YouTube page or the Unpaid Interns podcast, anywhere that you get your podcasts. Huge thank you to all the guys who came on this week. Paul Shuey and Steve Goff back on Monday was a great show. Obviously, Alexi on Wednesday and Kevin today. Remember, you can watch all 44 episodes and this one on our YouTube page. Thanks so much for joining us today. Labor Day, we're still deciding, might be an off day for the holiday. So likely we'll see you on, let's just decide that. Let's take it. We'll take a day off for the holiday on Monday, and we will see you on Wednesday, September 9th for the next episode of Unpaid Interns. But enjoy your holiday weekend. We'll see you next week.